I'm David Scandura.
I'm Justice Beckett, isn't it?
And today we're here to find out is Pride and Prejudice the greatest movie ever made?
What excellent boiled potatoes. Many years since I've had such an exemplary vegetable.
Welcome to the greatest movie ever made, the show where we watch a movie and tell you if it's the greatest movie ever made.
Pride and Prejudice in this economy?
Yeah.
Am I right?
A movie that is so thoroughly entertaining.
Sorry, that was
and
stupid as
compelling.
hell. I'm very sorry I interrupted you for that.
While you're watching, it's the only thing that matters in the world. Yeah, I know. I mean,
normally I just say something from the movie,
Yeah,
which is stupid in its own way.
that was the joke that was in my brain too. Pride and Prejudice. Wow.
Yeah, wow. You've heard of Pride. You've heard of Prejudice. What if there was both? Jane Austen, probably.
David Scandura, joined as always by my co-host and a guy who probably liked this movie more than me, Justice Burkett.
Did you not like Pride and Prejudice? I mean, I guess we'll get into it.
We'll get into it, but I have
Yeah.
a feeling that you fucked with this much more than I did.
Probably because I'm more of the classical romantic
Yeah.
of the two of us.
Yeah.
I like yearning and pining and longing, which this movie has in spades. Lots of yearning, lots of pining, and a dabbling of longing in here as well. A smidge of longing.
And lots of Keira Knightley smiling, and then like her tongue is kind of like just between her little teeth.
Yeah.
To be like, and she looks really excited.
Yes.
That's really when
Coy excitement.
Yeah, when her mother earlier in the movie calls her like plain, I'm like, obviously you haven't seen Pirates of the Caribbean and Curse of the Black Pearl.
I'm sorry. Also, you haven't seen Keira Knightley in the movie that you're in.
Yes,
Because she's iridescent. It's insane to call this woman plain. I understand the point of comparison is Rosamund Pike, which like that's a high bar.
sure.
But I do think Keira Knightley is still in the conversation. She does not deserve to be discounted
Yeah.
as holy as her mother.
Yeah, when
would lead the audience to believe. It's like, well, your sister is Rosamund Pike, but you're still Keira fucking Knightley.
when the four
in
main
2005.
the four main Bennett sisters in this movie are Rosamund Pike, Keira Knightley, Carey Mulligan, and Gina Malone, and I'm like, all of these are the most beautiful, attractive, charming women that have ever existed.
Yeah.
And any of these fucking dickhead English pricks in this movie would be lucky to marry them.
I know, which makes it so funny in this movie when Dame Judi Dench, visits this house and is like, I understand what you're doing. You have a bunch of pretty daughters and you're after my money, right? And it's like, yeah, I sort of understand her. I sort of get where Judi Dench is coming from in this movie because you see that lineup that you just rattled off there and you're like, they're up to no good. This is they are too uniformly attractive across the board for this to not be nefarious. The Bennets have made some kind of pact with some kind of dark elder god to achieve their secret desires, and that's why all their daughters, capital L, look like this. A thing the Podmaster told me is that they like used period accurate makeup for this movie.
Okay.
So back in like Regency era when this movie is set, makeup mostly consisted of like, especially if you were the class that the Bennets are, sort of like upper middle class is kind of where they're at. They pretty much would only wear like blush or rouge. But that is basically it. And so that's pretty much all these women are wearing in this movie, if anything at all, on their faces, which again is bananas because everybody like has the most perfect skin that I've ever seen. And the Podmaster did mention that like apparently the skincare routine for the cast of Pride and Prejudice is like a thing that people always are trying to crack. like how did they do this? How did they all look this good with no makeup? Anyway, David, how are you doing?
I'm good.
Good.
I'm a little tired from the weekend of rehearsals in sunny old Prescott Valley.
Yeah.
For Lark Productions' remount of Comedy of Errors, which you are a part of as well.
Yeah, my hometown of Prescott Valley.
Yes.
Representing the 86314.
But the rehearsals were good. Actually, the one of them was good. Saturday was rough, but Sunday was pretty good. But despite the fact that I'm tired from that, I'm feeling good. I went on a little walk today, and there was a very friendly cat that I met.
Nice.
That was very interested in being pet, and
yeah.
that brightened my day like no other. As far as media recommendations, I finally listened to the new Amigo the Devil album, and it's great. Like,
yeah,
I
that's the one that came out like last year, 2 years ago, or
relatively recently.
Then maybe I haven't heard it either.
Yeah,
because I've heard the one that it doesn't matter. But I had heard one of his somewhat recent ones, but I think I might have missed this release. If it was this year, I haven't heard it.
It's his first one with like Amigo the Devil as a full band and not just session musicians. And despite that, like songwriting wise, it's one of his strongest records. It feels like it's a little bit more stripped down than some of his other stuff, because I always feel like Amigo the Devil's music works the best when it's just him and an acoustic guitar.
Right.
And there's some of that on this album, but I think he definitely he doesn't go too big and grandiose with the instrumentation.
Nice.
Yeah, that's me. How are you?
I'm doing well, I think. Yeah, overall good. A little bit of like a mixed bag, just like motivation wise generally, just having a hard time like doing all the things I need to do, but powering through it. In terms of media recommendations, every single person who can hear my voice right now needs to listen to the album Golden Shroud by Rose Kemp. Rose Kemp, daughter of 2 English folk musicians. She is also a folk musician, but went in a little bit more of an experimental direction. Some of her stuff is like drone doom. Some of it is like doom folk. Golden Shroud is very much a drone doom album, but it's very like vocal centric, which you don't get with a lot of doom metal, or drone metal, I should say. And it fucks. It's really, really, really good. And it's the last thing she released before her career went on indefinite hiatus, and she just started teaching vocal classes with her mom in England. And yeah, holy shit, it's so good. You can't find it on any streaming service, but it's on YouTube and it's on Bandcamp. And if you listen to it on Bandcamp and like it, buy it and give her some money so that she can actually see the fruits of her labor.
That's why Bandcamp rocks.
Yeah, we like Bandcamp here.
Yeah, I was really impressed with what you introduced me to some of her music over the weekend.
You got to listen to Golden Shroud, dog.
Yeah. I'll check that out. Oh, and also, like, I know I've already recommended her on the show, but just a reminder, I was listening to Julie Christmas's Hellfest set. Like, it was a professionally shot and recorded Hellfest set. I was listening to that, and if you enjoy evil women, making music about being evil, Audrey, I know you're listening.
Just calling out listeners by name individually.
Just listen to Julie Christmas.
Audrey Young, we're talking directly to you right now. Another thing Audrey Young should do, and also anyone else who are listeners who are local or not local, is the thing the Podmaster just texted me, which is KNAU, the local NPR affiliate. Their pledge drive's going on right now, so like also support public radio. Just give KNAU some money, because the Podmaster works for them and she'd appreciate it. And also, like, local news is important. I feel like this has gone very off the rails and we are very far from Pride and Prejudice now.
Well, let's go back to it.
Yeah.
Pride and Prejudice.
Pride and, if you can even believe it, Prejudice as well. Yeah.
So this was my first time with this movie.
Mine too. This was a Podmaster mandate.
Yes.
High Priestess Pod assigned us this film to watch and record an episode on this week.
There was this weird gap between our anniversary episodes and then Halloween, where I didn't really know what to do there, because we did a bunch of action. We did action movies, and animated movies for the anniversary. We're going to be doing horror movies. I just wanted something that was totally different, and I asked the Podmaster to pick something for us, and she picked Pride and Prejudice.
Yep.
From 2005, directed by Joe Wright, starring Matthew Macfadyen and Keira Knightley.
Yes.
I don't know that I've interacted with the Pride and Prejudice story in various ways.
Yeah.
But I still don't know it very well. I may have read it, but if I've read it, the story that I remember is that my English teacher in high school ordered a bunch of books for the class, but accidentally ordered the like dumbed down
like the Cliff's Notes?
Like
Cliff's Notes?
Not the Cliff's Notes, but like we're translating it to like modern English for a younger audience with like study questions in it.
The No Fear Shakespeare ass.
Sort of, yeah.
Shit.
Yeah. So, and she was just like, fucking Arizona teacher budgets, I can't get these returned and replaced. So we just read that version of it. And then I recently remembered that NAU Theater put it on when we were going there.
Yes.
And my girlfriend at the time was a big Pride and Prejudice slut, as many white women are. I feel like this is
the
your
Podmaster
girlfriend's
just wooed from the other room at that.
I feel like this is everyone's girlfriend's favorite movie. So I saw it then, or I saw the play. But I don't think I've ever actually read the book. I don't know it very well. I haven't seen any other movie versions of it. But I know that basically Mr. Darcy's fucking weirdo and until he's hot and sexy.
Yeah.
And then Elizabeth falls in love with him and they kiss.
Yes. Although, yeah, I would challenge that summary a little bit because I think they're into each other immediately, and what ensues is just the biggest fucking round of foreplay ever committed to fiction.
Oh, this is 2 hours of cock teasing.
Yes. This is a movie about negging.
Yeah.
This all Darcy and Lizzie do. The entire runtime of both the movie and the play version of it, which I was in when we were at NAU. I've never read the book, but I've read the play. I was in the play, and then I've seen this movie now, right? And in all versions that I'm familiar with, it's about negging.
Mm-hmm.
It's literally just like, oh, I hate you so much. You make me sick. I can't stand to be in your presence. You're so rude.
Darcy's taken a playbook from like the pickup artist thing where it's like just nag and insult a woman until she loves you.
But she's doing the same thing to him.
Sure.
Right? It's negging on both sides. The Podmaster wants me to correct this and say the word is longing, not negging. I think those are two different things. They're longing for each other because they're horny for each other. But the way that they flirt is just by insulting each other. It's straight negging. It's right out of the pickup artist. Yes, which is negging. That's what... Anyway, yes, and you know, it's British and it's, you know, so it's ever so witty.
Yeah.
There's lots of witty quips that compose the vast majority of the runtime of this story. I think that's true to, I've never read the book, but my understanding is that's very true to the book and very true to Jane Austen's writing. The wittiness of it all is kind of like a crucial, integral thing to her style and to the types of stories that she tells. Anyway, yeah, I guess we can talk about the movie. I don't really have any other history with Pride and Prejudice. I'd never seen it before.
Yeah.
Podmaster likes it, but this was the first time I'd ever seen it. So.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, let's talk about the movie. Pride. And as well, in addition to Pride, Prejudice.
Yes. So, like, the thing that becomes immediately clear when you're watching this movie, like, pretty much as soon as it starts, is a gorgeous film.
Yes.
Pretty much immediately, you're like, wow, this movie is unbelievably beautiful to look at.
Yeah.
I think one of its biggest strengths, in my opinion.
I think it's its biggest strength. I think the level that I connected to this movie on the most is how gorgeous this thing looks. And in particular, like, this movie for its entire runtime is just a masterclass in how important framing and blocking is.
Yes.
In a film. You know, like people forget about blocking because, you know, it's more of a theater thing, or
right.
But a well blocked movie conveys so much about character relationships,
right,
just based on their arrangement in the frame,
right.
And this movie does that basically perfectly.
Yeah,
for the entire runtime.
I feel like in the history of our podcast, we've talked a lot about good cinematography, but blocking is its own thing.
Yeah,
right. And I think you're totally right that this movie is immaculately blocked, right? Because it's not like cinematography has more to do with where's the actor in the frame. Blocking has to do with where is the actor in relation to other things that are also in the frame, right? And it's like this movie does such a good job of that. The visual gag where all of the Bennett women are like hastily like cleaning up the house when Mr. Bingley shows up unannounced, right? And then there's like the very funny moment of editing where we edit to him entering and they all like stand up and curtsy. It's like the editing moment is very funny, but the blocking is funny too because they're all like equidistant from each other and like perfectly lined up. to where it looks like they're like trying so hard to be casual, like, you just dropped in, I'm here with my crocheting, I'm here with my book, right? But it's like because they're so immaculately like spaced from each other, it looks so unnatural. So immediately the visual gag is like, yeah, this is like a prepared visual for him to walk into. Yeah.
And there's so many moments in this movie that, you know, I didn't realize it at first, and then after like the third or fourth one, I was like, oh, we're still doing this, which is these long takes through these lavish party scenes, and characters coming in and out of the frame, and the camera focusing on a character for a moment and then moving on to the next one, and they're really long and elaborate. Without drawing attention to themselves in like a flashier way, which so many movies try to do now with their oneers. But so much of the relationships, you know, particularly Elizabeth and Darcy, is just conveyed through these party scenes and how they're moving in and out of the frame in the path of the camera.
Yeah.
And beyond that, I think like also the production design of this movie, I read that they slightly changed the period that it's in, or like it's maybe a few years earlier than it is in the book. Because there is a like a I'm trying to think of a word other than like grittiness to this.
Yeah.
But with like the Bennett house and stuff, you know, they're relatively well off, but it feels a lot more grounded and down to earth than it maybe normally would in these types of you know, period dramas.
Right. Like if the Bennetts had electric lights, the vibe of this movie would be different. Yeah. It's a lot of it is about like everything's like, you know, the Bennetts, like I said, are upper middle class, but like everything's a little dingy in their house. Like the wallpaper like looks like kind of like if you ran a dust cloth over it. There'd be something left behind.
And I don't know how much of this movie is shot in natural light.
Yeah.
But it definitely feels like it.
Yeah.
It for a good majority of it.
Yeah. Especially the golden hour scenes. Like the kind of like late afternoon, early evening stuff. And also the early morning stuff, like sunrise stuff. That all feels very much like they were taking advantage of natural lighting.
Yeah, like sunlight streaming through the Bennett house,
and it translates gorgeously to the screen. Remarkably well lit movie, as well as well shot and well blocked and well edited. Just looks fucking great. Score's a banger too.
Score rocks.
Yeah, I love all of the like the solo piano stuff here. The orchestral stuff is also great. It's just a really nice looking and nice sounding movie, right? Which goes a long way because this movie is mostly vibes. The story is not terribly complicated. And what the story is, I mean, people know Pride and Prejudice, so we can probably like sort of gloss through it and just kind of talk about the stuff that we took away from the scenes. But like, you know, Elizabeth Bennet is the second oldest. She wants to get married, but kind of. She's more interested in reading and enriching herself as a person.
Yeah.
But she doesn't not want to get married.
Yeah, but her mother is in particular is really desperate to get her
This mom
daughters married off.
What a fucking head case, man. Mrs. Bennet is a fucking psycho.
Yeah.
And I understand part of the point of Jane Austen's story and also the movie is that living in a patriarchal society has made her this way, right? Like she is a victim of the patriarchal power structures that basically have said, you know, women's only role in this society is as property to privilege or advantage a man in some way, or privilege or advantage the woman's family, right? But it's like her feelings and stuff are irrelevant, right? And so like they like obviously all of that damage has been done to her, and that's why she's like this. But also, holy shit, what a head case. When she's like, fucking, we already called it out. When she's in front of like company being like, yeah, it's a shame my daughter Lizzie's so fucking hideous. Otherwise I'd be able to marry her off to somebody. It's like, Jesus, like, she's right there. Like,
oh, what a butterface. Woman, you're talking about Keira fucking Knightley.
But even if it wasn't Keira Knightley,
calm down.
That is a horrible thing to say about your daughter. Right?
Obviously.
And it's like, man, this woman has like tact is a word that has never existed in this woman's entire brain, you know? Like she's just like fully tactless, which is like the thing. That's the thing that Darcy picks up on, right? Is like, yeah, this woman is like conniving and trying to get me to marry one of her daughters, like very blatantly and openly. Like she has Machiavellian schemes to get these girls married off to rich husbands. And he's like, I want to stay far away from that. And that is a point in this movie where I'm like, yeah, I'm with Darcy. Like that would scare me off too.
Right.
Yeah.
The repeating joke of the mother and the daughters waiting in the next room anytime a man, a potential suitor, asks to be alone with one of the daughters,
pressing all their ears against the door,
listening for the wedding proposal.
Yeah. A thing that this movie does, I think, quite well is making this period of time, sort of like Regency era, right, seem very romantic and pleasant and enticing, but also showing the other side of the coin and being like, but it was also kind of horrible and disgusting to live at this time. I think it does both, because like the shit with like Mrs. Bennet being just so horrible to Lizzie, and also like all of the women being almost entirely motivated by marrying a rich man.
Yeah.
The movie seems to be treating it pretty objectively. Like they're not saying like it's good that all of these women's entire purpose in life is just to marry a rich guy and settle down and provide for their family, right? The movie's kind of saying like, this is what this is. Take from it what you will. And I kind of appreciate that, because there are scenes in this movie where you're watching it and you're like, that's really fucked up. And the movie kind of gives you room to explore in your own head. Like, wow, that's really fucked up. I'm glad we moved on from this, but also there are aspects of this that are still present in our society, and it lets you wrestle with that.
And that's
stuff.
what makes Lizzie such a compelling protagonist,
of course,
in this film, because she's
this is why Pride and Prejudice is a pinnacle of feminist literature even today.
She's our window into this world, and she's so critical of it, and she can observe it and critique it. And I think the writing of this script in particular, I can't really speak to how accurate this is to the book. The writing of her character in this film and Keira Knightley's performance, which is great in this movie, obviously.
Yeah.
Those do just such a good job of immediately endearing us to this character. And it also make it Darcy's similarly critical and disinterested with this society and lifestyle too.
Yes, which is a thing that I think Matthew Macfadyen does a very good job of performing. I think his sort of like his brand of Mr. Darcy aloofness, right, reads to me very much as like, I'm disinterested in this entire construct of high society that I am obligated due to my position to participate in, right? And I'm like, yes, like that's great. He doesn't seem snobbish. He doesn't seem the way that he's playing aloof is not off-putting. It's very much like, no, yeah, he just doesn't give a shit.
Yeah.
Right? He doesn't give a shit about these people. He doesn't give a shit about these parties. He doesn't give a shit about all these fancy things that he is compelled to live surrounded by, right? Which earns him a lot of goodwill, which is important because he's also richer than God. and so at a certain point in this movie, you do have to be like, yeah, like he's being a real mopey little bitch, but he's also has a palatial estate full of Greek architecture.
Yeah, when like later in the movie when Lizzie goes to see his mansion.
Yes, and falls in love with a marble bust of him.
Well, and she spends like the movie spends so much time where she's just wandering around this mansion, and then finally comes across him.
Yes.
It's like you can't even find this guy in his own house because it's fucking massive.
And she's like, oh, I'm so sorry. Your house, which is also a museum, was open to the public today. Which is insane that used to be a thing. Where if you were rich enough and like lived, I guess it's still technically a thing if you're like the queen, or I guess the king now. R.I.P. to that dead lady. But like it used to be much more of like a thing where you were just rich enough that you owned multiple giant properties, and your grounds were basically like the equivalent of private parks, but you would open them to the public on certain days, and people would just like wander around in your yard, get guided tours through your house while you weren't there. Like, it's like, that's so fucking insane. It's insane because people are insanely rich now, and actually richer than they were then, right? But it's like, I feel like wealth was flaunted in a way that you just don't really see anymore, where it's like it's truly the remnants of like the lord and peasant relationship.
Yeah, well, back then, if you were fat, you were considered wealthy,
right?
Which, like, I would have been a fucking king back then. by that metric,
you would have been throwing these huge balls in this that we see in this movie. You would have been everyone would have been like, hey, let's set up one of the Bennett girls with that guy. He looks rich as hell.
Food for tonight's ball will be buffalo wings and cheeseburgers.
Yes. I can't wait to go to Lord Scandura's ball. They say that there is going to be a deep fried mozzarella stick. I've never heard of such a thing. What an exotic delight. Yeah. Yeah, so anyway, like the movie starts, we kind of get a feeling of the dynamic between all the Bennett girls. The ones that are important are basically Jane, Lizzie. I was trying to do them in order, and I'm already forgetting what order they're in.
Yeah.
There's Lydia and Kitty. They're the younger ones. And then Mary is like the middle one, and she kind of doesn't matter.
Yeah.
She feels bad for Mr. Collins at one point, and that's all the characterization she gets. And she also reads a lot, I think, and is kind of weird. She's the weird one.
And I think the dynamic between these actresses and the characters is, again, one of the things that I really enjoy about this movie, when it is just them having breakfast together and hanging out and fawning over all of these men.
Yeah.
The dialogue has that sort of, I mean, it is very elevated and accurate to the time period. But what I like is that everyone's also having conversations over each other in a very naturalistic way.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. The other key member of the Bennett household is Mr. Bennett, who is played by Donald motherfucking Sutherland. And I don't know about you, David, I fucking love Donald Sutherland in this movie. He elevated this movie for me probably by like a half star to a full star. Like I was
Okay.
just, anytime I saw Donald Sutherland, I was like, let's fucking go, Mr. Bennett. Yes.
So I interesting anecdote about Donald Sutherland.
Yeah.
I've always enjoyed him as an actor. I'm not as like hype on him as everyone else has, and maybe I just haven't seen like the right role from him or his most famous roles. But for the last 5 years, I thought that Donald Sutherland was dead. And then he actually died this year. And every time I was like, oh yeah, Donald Sutherland, I would go and look and I was like, oh, he's still alive. And then forget about it. The next time I thought like, is Donald Sutherland dead?
Yeah.
And that happened with, I think it was a trio of Christopher Plummer, Max von Sydow, and Donald Sutherland.
Yeah.
And I kept forgetting if those three were dead or not. And then they all subsequently died one after another in the last 5 years or so.
Yeah.
It may have been because Donald Sutherland was in Hunger Games, right?
Yeah, he's President Snow in
Okay,
those,
because I remember, I think it was because Philip Seymour Hoffman's in those movies too.
Correct, yes.
Okay, and I didn't realize
At least
that.
the first one. I don't know if he's in any of the others.
Okay, I didn't realize that.
Yeah.
Because I haven't seen them.
Yeah. I've only seen the first one.
But I think when they referred to someone referred to like someone in the Hunger Games movies had died, and it was Philip Seymour Hoffman.
And
for whatever reason, I thought it was Donald Sutherland.
And also, like, that is a crazy way to refer to Philip Seymour Hoffman being dead. Like, oh yeah, that guy from the Hunger Games who died. It's like, I'm sorry, that guy from what?
But Donald Sutherland in this movie is fucking awesome.
Yeah.
And he just, if this movie were, a couple 100 years in the future,
yeah,
this man would be drinking a Guinness.
Yes.
And watching football on TV.
Yes, watching the footy. Watching cricket or some shit.
Yeah.
'Cause we're in England.
Yeah.
Yeah. I fucking love Mr. Bennett as a character. I've loved Mr. Bennett as a character prior to seeing this movie because obviously like I was in the play, so I was familiar with the story and the characters. I love him. He's so, like Mr. Darcy, so disinterested with the whole rules of society thing. The whole like women have to come out and present themselves to all the eligible young men, and then the eligible young men will like pick them, and it's good for the family. And it like, he's like, so like, I don't fucking give a shit. I just want to read my books. I want to read my newspaper. I want to talk to my smart daughter and insult my dumb ones. He is pretty ruthless with when Lydia runs off with Mr. Wickham. He's like, well, she's a dumb bitch anyway. So honestly, if he kills her, that'll be a little sad, but it's probably better than her coming back pregnant and unwed. Is sort of the tone of what he's saying. And I'm like, holy shit, man. But with Lizzie, he's very nice because he's like, you're my smart one.
Yeah.
I understand you. We both read books.
I think one of the shots of the movie over breakfast, and he's reading the newspaper.
Yeah.
And he just flips it. Someone says something, and he just flips it down, and you just see his eyes.
Yeah.
It's like, that man
yeah,
does not give a single fuck.
He rocks. And he's also like despite his sort of apathy toward the whole societal structure around the sort of central plot thrust of this movie, which is marriage, right? Aside from that though, like he also, there's a lot of depth to him, and Donald Sutherland does a great job of performing him, where it's like he does legitimately care about his kids. He loves his daughters. He wants what's best for them. And even his relationship with Mrs. Bennett, I think, is like pretty well established, where it's like he does find her whole kind of like matchmaker Machiavellian scheme thing like bemusing and maybe a little annoying. But, like, there's something in her that he is, like, drawn to, and they're also very tender and sweet with each other, and I, like, love seeing all that stuff.
Yeah.
Where he's basically like, I don't understand why society has to be this way, but I love all you ladies who I live with in this house, and I want what's best for all of you, and I'm, like, more interested in reading my books than any of your personal drama, but, like, he still, like, cares.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
At the end of the movie, when Darcy asks for her hand.
Yeah.
Which is, I think, an important thing, because we don't, if I remember correctly, none of the other suitors like ask him for permission
That's
first.
right. They don't give a shit what he thinks.
Right. And Darcy doing that and then leaving, and then Lizzie coming in and talking to him. The like joy on his face is one of the more powerful moments of the movie for me.
Yes.
Justice, does this have a justice cry count?
It does not. I did not cry watching Pride and Prejudice from 2005.
Okay, for the second time in the history of the podcast, I'm going to say that Pride and Prejudice has a David cry count.
Wow, this is unprecedented. You cried at a movie that I didn't cry at?
Yes.
That's never happened before, right?
It was The Wall.
The Wall.
I cried at The Wall.
Yeah. So never mind.
Yeah.
Not unprecedented.
But I fully expected that you
We've never cried
cry.
at the same movie.
No.
No, yeah, this didn't get any tears out of me. I don't know what it is. Maybe it's because I had already fully flushed my tear ducts by recently watching Titanic before watching this, at which I cried 4 times, 2 of which were heaving sobs so heavy that I gave myself the hiccups.
Holy shit.
Yeah, I cried my fucking eyes out watching Titanic last week. So maybe I just had nothing left to give.
I cry my eyes out with laughter every time Propeller Guy shows up.
Yeah, well, yeah, okay.
That's a
just to be
perennial
clear,
favorite.
Just to be clear, I was having a great time with Propeller Guy. Not nary a tear was shed for Propeller Guy. But man, sorry, just to talk about Titanic for half a second. Nothing gets me to cry more than like just a sad hymn played over a montage.
Oh.
And Titanic has the platinum tier, just the greatest of all time of that, which like obviously people have talked about this, but Nearer My God to Thee specifically, it hits so hard for me. And then that old couple holding each other in bed, I was crying so hard I thought I was gonna pass out.
Oh man.
Like I was like, I can't handle this. Yeah. My first time seeing Titanic from beginning to end, in order.
Yeah.
I'd caught parts of it on TV before, but hadn't seen the whole thing.
I've seen it twice, and I feel like I like it, but I should probably like it more. So I need to watch it again. I don't know.
You don't have to like it more. You're allowed to not like Titanic that much. You're allowed to be like, that's okay.
I guess so.
You are. Anyway, Donald Sutherland's great.
Yeah.
Yes.
I thought you were gonna cry at this movie because I figured you'd be like, "Oh, this reminds me of my wife," which often happens.
It does. But in a way that doesn't make me like cry though. You know, because it's like she's my wife is somewhat of a Lizzie Bennet type in that she reads a lot of books and is very witty, right? And I was a mopey little bitch when I met her, like Mr. Darcy.
Exactly.
But I think this movie doesn't capture the emotional feeling of our early relationship for me as much as something like A Girl Walks Home Alone at Night does, right? So it's much more like I did get emotionally invested in this movie. I felt a lot of things watching this movie. None of them like moved me to tears, you know? In the way that like the strength of the emotions in like like A Girl Walks Home Alone at Night do. So.
Do you want to guess what the cry count was?
Yeah, I'm gonna guess 1.
Correct.
Okay, yeah.
Do you have any ideas what it was?
Well, because we were just talking about it, I think it might be the end when Donald Sutherland is happy for
it's the double whammy of Donald Sutherland being happy, and then the final scene of the movie at night.
Mrs. Darcy. Who baby?
And she's like, yeah, you can only call me Mrs. Darcy when you are like incandescently happy.
Yeah.
And then he starts doing it, and I'm like,
and kissing her all over the place.
Oh my god!
I wasn't crying, but you know that's also a profoundly horny scene. When he's just kissing her all over her face and neck and being like, Mrs. Darcy, Mrs. Darcy, I was like, my dick might start crying here in a second.
Jesus
Christ. You know what I'm saying? It's very hot and sexy, is what I'm saying.
You characterize this movie as horny.
It's profoundly horny. This is one of the horniest movies I've ever seen.
I don't think I would use the word horny.
See, the Podmaster also tried to get me to sort of redefine what I was saying. But I'm sticking to my guns here. I do think this movie is horny. I think from the moment that they meet, more or less, Keira Knightley and Matthew Macfadyen are playing that they want to fuck each other, right? That is what I get from these performances. They're also playing a little bit more like they're complex, layered performances, so they're playing more than just that. but they clearly want to fuck. That's what that hand flex is about. He's like, fuck, I want to tear this woman's clothes off and fuck her, right? And it's like, that energy exists throughout so much of this movie that anytime the two of them are on screen and looking at each other, like that fucking dance sequence at the ball, I'm just like, this is like so hot and steamy. It's hot. It's as hot and steamy as anything in fucking Crash.
See, if this were a Crash prequel where they were fucking in horse and buggies and getting in accidents, then I would say it's the most horny movie ever made. But I don't think horny is the way that I characterize this movie. I read a review on Letterboxd that's from actually one of my high school friends, and normally I find that I disagree with a lot of his reviews. But he said that this movie captures the feeling of entering a new relationship and you don't really know where it's going to go.
Yeah.
And that moment where it's like, oh, her hand is on my leg and I can feel like every muscle in my leg, or my hand is like brushed up against hers.
Yeah.
Like it's those small moments of intimacy that like give us butterflies.
Right.
And I don't necessarily characterize that as horniness.
I see, and I think this is where our fundamental disconnect is, because everything that you just said, literally every word that just exited your mouth, I'm like, that is the horniest thing that there is. The horniest thing that there is being hyper aware of your proximity to like a new romantic partner, where like you haven't actually fucked yet, you haven't actually kissed yet, you maybe haven't even held hands yet, right? But the horniest human experience imaginable to me is like sitting next to that person and being like, I'm gonna touch your pinky with my pinky and see if you're down to hold hands, you know? Like it's like horniness to me is primarily an internal experience, right? It's not like fucking is the result of extended horniness, but it is not like a horny experience, right? To me, like the horniest thing is like wanting to fuck someone so bad, but like not even touching them. You know, like that's the horniest thing.
Okay, because to me the horniest thing I've ever seen is Amber Rain's 50-man gangbang. Rest in peace, Amber Rain. Gone too soon.
Holy shit. Yeah, I wasn't aware that she had passed.
She passed quite a few years ago.
Well, you know your porn stars better than I do.
Anyway, see, yeah, and I think we're maybe splitting hairs.
Yeah.
But it's a pretty big hair that we're splitting.
We're disagreeing on the definition of horny.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. But there is a foreplay. There is a sexual tension for sure.
Yes.
The shot that I was thinking of in this movie that was like, is like sets every nerve ending in my body on fire.
Yeah.
Like if I don't know, it's just it's at one of the parties and Lizzie's walking. It's one of those tracking shots through the parties. Lizzie's walking toward the camera, and Darcy cuts through the crowd, walks behind her for a moment, and then darts and like goes into the next room or something like that.
Yep.
Like he's in and out.
Great shot.
I think a lot of people will probably say like a similar feeling would be better conveyed in like the mirror shot at the end of this movie, which yes, also that. But that
I see the one that really does it for me, does I think the same thing, is the one where Lizzie's talking to, I don't even remember who else she's talking to, but she's talking to somebody else and Darcy, and she's addressing the other person and looking directly at them. And then the camera is still on her, and you don't see Darcy, but you see her eyes move to him, and she's just looking up at him out of the tops of her eyes, and it's just her attention going from the one person to him, and her expression just changing because of the person that she's addressing.
Mm-hmm.
That shot, I was like, oh, fuck. Yeah. Anyway, you know who we haven't talked about yet, and who is like a primary character in this movie, and also probably about where we're at plot summary wise, which is still the very beginning. Mr. Bingley.
Oh, I was gonna say the pig with the giant ball sack.
Oh, okay, yeah. Like Mr. Bingley does appear before the pig with the giant ball sack, but let's just talk about this pig.
The fucking nuts on this pig.
This pig has like 2 softballs for nuts. Approximately. Approximately picture two softballs next to each other in a bag that is like bright pink, because that is the color of a pig's scrotum. And you have the correct mental image.
This movie, I was surprised to learn is PG. I thought it might go for a PG-13.
Yeah.
But those nuts alone warrant this thing an R.
I cannot tell you how shocked I was that Pride and Prejudice 2005 contains a pristine, clear HD shot of pig testicles just centered in frame, where you're just like, man, the director Joe Wright,
yes.
Wright, he really wanted me to see these pig nuts. He was like, pig balls. And the studio was like, hey, can we cut any of this for time? Like, maybe we could take a slice here, a slice there. He's like, the pig nuts stay in. I want those pig testicles on screen, god damn it.
with all of the witty dialogue and quips and great performances in this movie, nothing made me laugh as hard as watching this pig with these giant swinging bowling balls for testicles walk across the screen for 2 seconds.
I do think this pig's nuts do sort of steal the movie. Like, it's the thing I thought the most about after the movie ended. I was like, I don't know that I've ever seen a movie feature pig testicles before. I don't know that I've seen that committed to narrative cinema before.
Pride and Prejudice and pig nuts. Do you know, I heard that pigs orgasm for 30 minutes.
Oh, man.
And
that sounds great. I would love to be a pig.
Yeah.
I hope if reincarnation is real, I come back as a pig. Because it's like, I get to roll around in mud. I get to just fucking eat until I'm fat as hell. I get to come for 30 minutes. And then someone will eat me. It's all I've ever wanted. Just fucking wallow in my own shit. Have 30-minute orgasms and become bacon, a thing I love.
But yeah, we should talk about Mr. Bingley. What if a Weasley was hot?
Yes.
What if we put
Mr. Bingley?
What if we yassified Ed Sheeran?
Mr. Bingley is one of the funniest names that I can imagine being said repeatedly in a British accent, and it happens so many times in this movie that people are just like, Mr. Bingley, Mr. Bingley, Mr. Bingley.
It's like there was a baseball game that was made in Japan.
Yeah.
And they tried to come up with American names, and they were all like ridiculous.
Right. Joe Hamburger.
Yeah. It's like that, but British.
Yes. Mr. Bingley is an objectively funny name.
Yeah.
Also objectively funny man, because he's basically like, I'm rich, but also I'm a little bit shy. And like Jane is like, hey, like I think you're hot, and also like my mom wants me to marry you because you're rich, but mainly I think you're hot. And he's like, oh, Rosamund Pike thinks I'm hot. I'm so scared. Like. The central like narrative.
I mean, maybe he's seen Gone Girl.
Yeah. The Podmaster did say while she was watching this movie with me that she does want to see a period version of a Gone Girl-esque story where it's just like a woman losing her absolute mind and just behaving like a total psycho, but like Regency era. Which obviously, like, Rosamund Pike in this movie is the thing that gave her that idea.
Mm-hmm.
Mr. Bingley just has no game. He manages to, like, have somewhat of a relationship with Rosamund Pike despite having no game, but most of the, like, narrative conflict for the beginning of this movie is just because Mr. Bingley is bad at having a relationship with Jane, because he's like, oh, she doesn't like me as much as I like her, so I'm going to play it all aloof because that's what Darcy said to do. And it's like, fucking, she's Rosamund Pike. She's hanging out with you a bunch, dude. Just shoot your shot, dog.
I mean, if Rosamund Pike, if there's even a chance that you are going to land Rosamund Pike,
yeah,
I think you have a certain level of game just naturally.
That's true. But not enough game to just like he's like he holds off on proposing to her because Darcy's like, well, I don't know if she likes you as much as you like her. And if I was Mr. Bingley, I'd be like, fuck off, man. I gotta try.
Yeah.
Like, if there's a chance that she's gonna say yes, I have to take this opportunity. But yeah, so that's like the main thing is basically they dance at a dance. The Bennet sisters all go to a dance. Mr. Bingley's there. Mr. Darcy's there. Mr. Bingley's evil sister is there. And they all dance. And the dance sequence is another scene in this movie that I wanted to kind of hone in on a little bit. Because Elizabeth dancing... First of all, before I get to Elizabeth dancing with Darcy, this type of, like, old-timey, like, Regency era dancing looks fun as fuck to me. I want to go to this party so bad. It seems so fun because the dance is pretty simple. The music's like lively, jaunty English folk like fiddle music. It's not like the stuffy fucking waltzy shit. You know, we're like a little country here, you know? And I'm like, the vibe is just immaculate at this dance.
So there's no quicker way to lose me in a period drama than showing stuffy British aristocrats dancing.
Yeah.
So believe me when I say it is a testament to how well this film is shot and blocked, again, that the dancing sequences at the parties are one of the highlights of the film for me.
Yes.
Also, I love I think one of the first parties in the movie when we're introduced to Darcy and Darcy walks in and like the music stops and the dance floor parts and we get like a shot from him from behind. He's like Darth fucking Vader walking into this movie and everyone's like scared of him.
He's the Dark Lord of Marriage. He's the final boss of marrying your daughter off.
But yeah, I mean, I think the music is great and the way they showcase the dancing moves and the way that the partners are all interacting with each other. And then of course the great moment in the movie when it's showing Lizzie and Darcy dancing alone.
Yeah.
That's sort of like a fantasy sequence.
And really good moment of editing where you kind of don't notice when it switches from being a room full of people to just being the two of them. And it's like it's very well done. Yeah. The editing is very good.
And the moment when they're all dancing and everyone's sort of trying to have a conversation with each other.
It's such an effective meet cute because they've already met by the time they're dancing together and exchanged a few barbs, right? But this is really the moment where they're like getting to know each other for the first time, and it like them just doing these little quippy exchanges while they're passing each other in the dance choreography. And then there's a break in the dialogue when they get farther away from each other and there's like the tension of them getting close enough to whisper things in each other's ears again. It's like, it's so fucking hot. It's like really hot. And this is one of the high points of the movie for me is this dance sequence between Elizabeth and Darcy. I think it works so well. It's such a good example too of what you can do with this story in cinematic language that you can't do on stage. Because obviously I was in a stage production of Pride and Prejudice that contains this scene where they go to this party and meet and quip around a bit. But in the movie, you can have the cameras super close to their faces. And these are kind of like muttered lines that only the other character is capable of hearing. Obviously, when you're on stage, you got to be projecting, you got to be talking loud enough for the audience to hear, and it doesn't capture the same kind of intimacy that you get in cinema, right? And so it's like this as a film adaptation of Pride and Prejudice, I think makes the best use of the tools of film to tell this story in a way that's like effective for the medium.
Yeah. I'm just adding to my list of like really, really good things about this movie. This movie is filmed so well and does such a good job of telling this story and making me understand this story that it got me interested in Pride and Prejudice.
Right.
Which previously I was only interested in Pride and Prejudice if we added zombies to it.
Right.
And I never actually read that book or saw that movie.
No. Nor did I.
But I think the dancing the conversation while they're dancing is so good. And welcome back to the show, Tom Hollander, who is also in this scene and trying to like butt in on the conversations.
Yes.
So what a fucking dork.
We need to talk about Mr. Collins. I think by the time they go to the dance, he's already come over to eat. And we already had the scene where he was like, I want to marry Jane. And Mrs. Bennet is like, well, actually, Jane might be spoken for.
Mm-hmm.
We're planning on setting her up with Mr. Bingley. So how about my ugly daughter? Will you take her as a consolation prize? And he's like, well, yeah, that's the one I wanted all along, actually. So Mr. Collins he's a ridiculous tiny man who is a priest and has an enormously rich benefactor, Miss Catherine de Bourgh. Lady Catherine de Bourgh, excuse me. If Lady Catherine
de Bourgh, played by Dame Judi
Dench, yes. And so he's like this sniveling little suck up, right? And the thing with Mr. Collins, both from my previous knowledge of Pride and Prejudice and also watching this movie, I know I'm not breaking any new ground here. Like, this analysis has already been done, but there's basically like 3 ways that you can read this character as far as I can tell. One is he's a ridiculous little dork. The second one is he's a fucking sociopath. And the third one is this man is not attracted to women. And those don't have to be mutually exclusive. It can be some combination of those things. But I feel like those are kind of the 3 vibes that I get from him. Is like when he says the potatoes thing at dinner, I've never had such an exemplary vegetable or whatever the fuck he says. It's like, that's like, this man is now giving me fucking Dennis Rader vibes. This man is the BTK killer. He is putting on lady masks and fucking autoerotic asphyxiating himself after he like breaks into a woman's house who he's gonna murder. But then at points in this movie, I'm like, poor Collins. I think this is a man who is not attracted to women, who just has to exist in the society where he's expected to take a wife, right? And he's just like, well, yeah, I guess I'll take Lizzie because I kind of don't give a shit because I'm not attracted to women, right? So it's like, whoever. Yeah, Jane, okay, no, fine. The next one, sure, right? Is sometimes the vibe I get from him, where I'm like, I don't know what his deal is. I don't know if he's queer. I don't know if he's asexual. But I was getting the vibe where, like Mr. Bennet and like Lizzie and like Darcy, he kind of doesn't fully buy into this whole societal, like, you have to pair off. And that's like what's good and right in society. He's kind of like, yeah, I don't really like feel a compulsion to do that from my innermost being. But like society is inflicting it upon me. So I guess I have to try and get a wife, you know? He's a very interesting character to me.
He is very interesting to me. I will say that I didn't necessarily get that interpretation, but that's not to say that you're wrong. I think he is a very layered character, and there's a few different ways you can look at him. That just didn't stick out to me on this watch. But what really tipped me off to this guy being a dork is when he's sitting at dinner and he's like, I was wondering if after dinner I could read to you all for an hour or 2. And I'm like, bitch, you better be fucking reading God Emperor of Dune. And he's like, there's some lovely sermons.
A thing
and
no dork would ever want, by the way. Someone reading God Emperor of Dune to them out loud. On the total opposite end of the spectrum from dork.
The worm god has some very nice diatribes about how policemen are inherently corrupt.
Yes. Yeah, nothing screams not dork-like more than getting your political theory from a man-worm hybrid written by a libertarian sex pervert. Just kidding. I love Dune. I'll get around to God Emperor.
Oh, it's so good.
Yeah. But yes, the let me read to you all for an hour or 2 after dinner. I was like, that is my literal nightmare.
Yeah.
Like, what a horrible fate. And like, you know, when I was growing up, my mom used to read to me and my brothers after dinner, but that was different than being read to by Mr. Collins, the driest and most boring man in existence.
His haircut is also...
His haircut's fucking
pathetic.
This haircut screams impotence. This is the haircut of a man whose cock does not work.
Yeah. Anton Chigurh's haircut looks entirely normal compared to this guy.
Yeah. It's like he's got like tiny little bowl cut bangs and then like sort of an almost mullet in the back.
If there was a mullet for the Regency era.
Yes. If there was like if there was a mullet for people who don't fuck. It is Mr. Collins' hairstyle. Yeah, a ridiculous human being who I loved seeing in this movie. And I love him being cucked at the dance.
Yeah.
Him being like, so Lizzie, I thought we would dance together. And she's like, I'm going to get the fuck away from this guy. I'm looking at that tall snack over there, that tall brooding snack.
Actually, you know who my favorite character is in this movie other than the pig with the giant nuts?
And other than Mr. Bennett, who is, of course, the best character who's ever existed. Who?
Mr. Fitzwilliam. Because the scene where he shows up, it's like Darcy and Lizzie haven't seen each other for a very long time, and they have this meeting, and then he goes, "Hi, I'm Mr. Fitzwilliam," and this is one of my 3 lines in the movie.
Yes. Is he also the one who just like fully explains everything that that Darcy did?
Yeah, in church.
Just super casually is like, well, yeah, he said all this shit. I guess I'll divulge my dear friend's deepest secrets to this lady who I just met.
It's just gassing up your buddy to
Mr. Fitzwilliam's a great wingman.
Yeah,
it's true.
yeah.
Because he's basically like, well, that Darcy guy, I know it seems like he's brooding a lot, but he's actually noble as fuck.
Hey man, thanks for saving me from that house fire.
Yeah, Fitzwilliam, you want in your corner. Yeah, so like there's the whole meet cute with Darcy and Lizzie. And this leads to, so like there's basically been 2 kind of romantic connections. One is like much more conventional, which is Jane and Mr. Bingley. And they're like sort of pining after each other, writing each other letters and shit. And then there's like Lizzie and Darcy, where she's like, that guy's really hot, but he's also kind of an asshole. But that kind of makes him hotter. Which I think Jane Austen invented that. But then the Mr. Wickham shows up around here, and we get a little bit of like a conflicting thing as far as like Lizzie's love interests. Because the soldiers come in. Kitty and Lydia, who are both, their character is basically they are horny teenagers. Like they're just teenagers who are boy crazy, right? Mm-hmm. So the soldiers show up, and Kitty and Lydia are like, woohoo, men in uniform. And this is where we get introduced to Mr. Wickham, who seems like polite at first and whatever, but we'll learn that he's a scoundrel and a cad and whatnot. I think the guy who plays Wickham, I didn't recognize the actor.
No, he looks like a dollar store Orlando Bloom.
Yeah, a little bit. I thought he did a fine job in this movie. Yeah. Wickham doesn't have a ton to do, but he's like sort of the closest thing that this movie has to an antagonist, right? Where it's like he comes in, he's all charming with Lizzie. She's kind of thinking about like, well, what if I went after him instead of Darcy? And then you learn that he's like a fucking huge asshole. And that's basically the whole thing with him.
Who did you play?
I played Wickham.
You played Wickham?
Yes, I was Mr. Wickham.
That's why I asked, because I know we had talked about Pride and Prejudice over the weekend.
Yes.
And I couldn't remember what you said.
Yes, I was Mr. Wickham. I was the cad, the scoundrel, the scallywag of the story, which is pretty much typecasting for me. I play villains a lot. And so I was Mr. Wickham. I was the dashing man in uniform who like comes in and charms everybody and is secretly just like a fucking womanizer, who has no honor. Yeah. And it's like a fine role to play, but much like in the movie, in the stage play, he doesn't have a ton to do.
Sure.
He basically shows up, charms Lizzie for a little bit, runs off with Lydia, and then comes back and is like, well, I married her, and now I hate my life. Which I do think is very funny that Donald Sutherland, like, learns that Lydia has been married off to Wickham. And is like, well, great, the family's honor won't go down the toilet. Also, poor guy. And it's like, he's the one who stole your 15-year-old child and basically demanded a ransom to return her with her honor intact, right? And you're like, yeah, poor guy. Sucks that he has to put up with my 15-year-old daughter. She's a real bitch. It's like, I don't know about that, dude. She might outgrow some of this behavior, and then you might feel a little bit bad about this. I don't know.
So another big thing that happens around here is Collins proposes to Lizzie.
Yeah.
And I one of the reasons why I got like the dork impression. I was waiting so long to like figure out like, is Tom Hollander going to be what he normally is, which is just a giant prick,
Right.
or is he a dork? Because he started seeming really dorky, and then in this scene he kind of does both, where he proposes to her, and of course the family's hiding behind the door to listen, and he's like, "Here are the reasons why you should date me. Let me list them in order. Here are the reasons why you should marry me.
Number 1, I'm a gentleman. And number 2, I'm not like other guys. Yeah, he does have big incel energy.
Yeah, yeah."
Yeah.
And then shortly afterwards, Lizzie. This is another just like really, really great shot in this movie. Lizzie learns that he's married Charlotte, who is
Lizzie's friend.
Lizzie's friend. Okay.
Yes, I don't know if they're related. Which, by the way, Mr. Collins and Elizabeth are. They are cousins. He is proposing to his cousin, which is not weird because at the time it was normal, but also, what the fuck? It's so weird.
If we can call out Wickham for marrying a 15-year-old, we can call out Collins for trying to nail his cousin.
1000%, because both of those things were accepted at the time, and both of them are extremely weird. Marrying a 15-year-old, weird and gross. Marrying her cousin, also weird and gross. But yeah, it's so unsettling when in that proposal scene he calls her cousin. I'm like, ew, don't do that. I know I've read a lot of Shakespeare and like I'm used to this, but also it's still gross.
Oh, going back to the incel thing, he uses the word female at one point, and I love that Elizabeth throws it right back at him, and she leans into that word, and she's like, female.
Yes.
I can't even remember the line.
Yeah. She's great at like, Keira Knightley is great at playing the Jane Austen wordplay. Just her line deliveries, I feel like play up so much of the like the banter that's like inherent in the Austen text.
Yeah.
And yeah, like just the way that she chooses to hit certain words. It seems like she was like created in a lab to play Jane Austen heroines. But yeah, so
Charlotte marries Collins shortly after the proposal.
And here we have the Podmaster's very favorite line, as well as a lot of the internet's very favorite line from this movie, which basically Lizzie is like, well, why'd you marry Collins? He's ridiculous. And her response is, I'm 27 years old. I have no money, no prospects. I'm already a burden to my parents, and I'm frightened.
Yeah.
Which, highly relatable. That's why people like that line.
Yeah. And it's really representative of like the themes that the movie and I guess the book is tackling as well.
Right. Basically being like, if you're a woman in society at this time, like, yeah, this guy might be a fucking dork and also potentially a serial killer with a bunch of bodies in his basement under the rectory that he lives in. But also, it's like, what are your other options?
Does he read the Bible to the people he's chained up in his basement while they're still alive?
Almost definitely, yeah. It's a Gary Ridgway type, where he's like, the good book says that you're a whore, which means let me read you all of the verses about an unclean woman while I kill you. Yeah.
But I love the point of view shot, like the time-lapse point of view shot of Lizzie on the swing, and it spins around and like the seasons change around the Bennett estate.
Really good shit.
Just like really, really gorgeous filmmaking in this thing.
Yeah. Yeah, it's really good.
I think earlier you said like atmosphere and vibes, and I admittedly get really lost in like trying to figure out the plot of who's related to who and who's courting who, and you'll inherit so-and-so's estate and all of that.
It wasn't clear that Mr. Darcy has 10,000 a year. Mr. Bingley has 5,000 a year.
It was clear that Mr. Darcy was really fucking rich.
Twice as rich as Mr. Bingley, apparently.
But as like a movie to like sit and let you kind of live in its world.
Mm-hmm.
That's where I really enjoyed this, and I was surprised that that's how I connected to this thing.
Yeah.
Because again, I'm normally not really interested in this type of movie. Because they often get so bogged down in the plot.
Yeah.
But I think the way it's shot and the more grounded aesthetic that it has in presenting this period, and of course the music and everything else, like it made it made me really appreciate the movie on that more like atmospheric vibes level. Feel like the word vibes is really fucking overused. But,
but I understand what you mean. It's basically like everything in this movie, rather than being in service of the plot, which is a route that a lot of similar movies take, right? Like Regency era romantic epics, right? A lot of them take the route of like everything is in service of the story. This movie, I think everything, including the story, is in service of the themes and the more than anything, the emotion, right? Like I feel like this movie is very centered around how it's supposed to be making you feel. More than you don't necessarily need to follow every single beat of the plot, every single like character who pops up for one scene, right? It's like it's much more about like what emotion it instills in you, the viewer. And I admire it on that level. I'm like, I do think it's a movie that exists primarily on like a gut level rather than an intellectual level.
And I think that's why I cried at the end.
Yeah.
Because as I was watching this, I could acknowledge, like, on a filmmaking level, this is really impressive. On a story level, I'm not really engaged.
Yeah.
But the combined, like, the emotions building throughout this movie and, like, compounding on top of one another and then culminating in, you know, the final moments of the movie.
Yeah.
That's what moved me so much.
Yeah. And I think it's like, again, playing to the strengths of the medium, because I'm sure the story in the Jane Austen book, which neither of us have read, but I'm sure that it's like the story itself has a lot more like heft and weight, because in the form of a novel, it has more room to breathe. There's more complexity available to a story when it's in the novel form versus when it's in the film form, right? At least like narrative complexity, right? But so I think the movie's playing to its strengths by keeping the story relatively simple. It's like the bare bones of Jane Austen's story here. And enhancing it with what film is good at, which is making you feel stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, so like there's like a time jump here. I don't remember if it's before or after the time jump. It doesn't really matter though. The main thing is that Jane has basically gotten a letter from Mr. Bingley, where it's like he's gonna be leaving. He's gonna be staying with Darcy and Darcy's sister, who he's like hoping to be close to or something. Or actually, no, wait. Before this, she does get sick and go to his house, or go to his house and then get sick. In that order, because that's one of Mrs. Bennet's Machiavellian schemes. So there is the whole thing where like Jane is like at Bingley's house, and because she like goes to visit him in a rainstorm, and then she gets a cold and has to stay like laid up there for a little while. This provides the wonderful like character thing with Lizzie, where she walks to like miles to the house where Bingley is to go visit Jane while she's sick, and everybody's like you walked here. She shows up all like her hair's all undone. She's like all mussed. She's got like mud on the bottom of her skirt, and everybody's like, oh, like Bingley's fucking shitty sister is like, oh, the state of her is kind of her vibe. And Lizzie's basically just like, I'm just here to be here for my sister. And Darcy really admires that. That's kind of a thing that kind of ignites a little bit of the flame that's between them.
This is all earlier in the movie.
Right, yeah.
At the start of their relationship.
Right.
And I like that he, you can tell she walks in and she looks like what one would assume to be like disheveled for the time.
She still looks like Keira Knightley.
But she still looks like Keira Knightley. And you could tell that he's still just like kind of enraptured with her beauty. And at some point in here, there's a line where I think Keira Knightley says something like, if she doesn't die of this cold, she'll die of having, a bitch of a mother or whatever. Another dig at the mom, which I like. And then when Keira Knightley leaves, we get the hand flex, which is really awesome.
Yes. If you've seen the movie, you know what we're talking about. But yeah, just this extreme close up on Matthew Macfadyen's hand after he helps Keira Knightley up into the carriage. and like so their hands have been touching, and as soon as like he takes the hand away and is walking away, he's just like flexing that hand, being like, "Whoo, I still feel her there, and that is making me feel some type of way," and that way is horned up. It's a very horny visual.
But so is he going back into the house to pound one out?
I think he's jerking off with that hand. Yeah.
Okay, because
he's like, I can't wash this hand until I jerk off with it. She's still there.
Because that's not the impression that I get.
No, that's not the impression that I get either. I think it's much more romantic than that.
Okay.
I was being facetious. But I still do think it's horny. I think it's horny in the way that it's very simultaneously exciting and exhilarating, but also like frustrating to be that attracted to someone, to be that into someone, and to like touch their hand for a second and not be able to do anything else. You know, I don't know. That's horny to me.
Okay.
We don't need to dwell on this too much. But yes, great moment. Love the hand flex.
Yeah.
Accomplishes its purpose marvelously in this film. Sorry, I didn't mean to take us back. I forgot all of that happened earlier. But yeah, basically like after the whole Collins thing, marrying Charlotte and that whole deal.
Well, Lizzie goes to stay with Charlotte and Collins.
Yes.
And this is where she meets the Lady Catherine de Bourgh.
Right.
Played by Dame Judi Dench.
Dame Judi Dench.
Who much like Denethor demands that she play her a song.
Yes.
On the piano forte.
On the pianoforte.
Sing me a song, Hobbit. and much like Pippin, she's like, "Oh, I'm not very good."
Yeah.
And
which I love. I love that she says she's not very good, and then she plays the song, and she's not very good.
Yeah.
Like, I like that the piano playing, I don't know if it was actually Keira Knightley, like, doing this. I don't know if she did her own piano for this movie, or if they layered it on top or whatever, right? But regardless, I love that they made it sound amateurish, and, like, she misses notes a couple times. She carries the melody, but she's kind of heavy-handed on the keys. Like, I fucking love that she doesn't, like, play beautifully.
Mm-hmm.
It's such a good touch for the movie, and it's so in keeping with her character, where she was like not being falsely modest. She's like, no, I'm like not good at this.
and it's I mean, Darcy's there, and it's a moment with her and Darcy as he's focusing on her playing.
Yeah.
And you can tell he's still just like
right,
completely focused on her and enraptured by it.
Yeah, and I think the fact that she was being honest about her own lack of skill and then like demonstrated it anyway is like very admirable to him.
Yeah.
He's like, oh yeah, she does kind of suck at this. And it's like kind of cute that she like is bad at this and is doing it anyway in front of everybody and like just doesn't care.
Yeah. So at some point in here, she learns the truth about Darcy, and I'm still not entirely sure.
Yeah.
What it is, but it leads to him.
Right.
It leads to him proposing to her, "I love you most ardently," which is a great line.
So there's multiple things. So this is before the whole Wickham thing, right? Before the whole Wickham running away with Lydia thing.
I'm not sure exactly.
Yeah. Because there's basically two things about Darcy.
Yeah, that's what I was a little unclear on.
The one thing is, so Mr. Bingley has gotten all aloof with Jane. Mm-hmm. He has like not been playing into the affection as much. And one thing that she learns about Darcy is that first she learns that he is the one who is telling Bingley to keep a distance from Jane, right? And so initially Lizzie responds like badly to that because she's like, well, what's your problem with my fucking sister? And he's like, well, it's your family. But then the thing that she learns that makes that better is basically that he was doing it out of protection for his friend. He felt like a very strong sense of like, I need to protect my friend from marrying for love if she doesn't love him back, right? And when she understands that and is like, oh, you literally thought that Jane wasn't interested in him and you were just being a good friend, then she sort of forgives him, right? That's thing one. And then the other thing is he's like talking shit about Mr. Wickham. Mr. Wickham's talking shit about him. And then she basically learns the truth, which is Wickham was like a ward of Darcy's father and inherited some of the estate, and then he fucking gambled it away. He was like a total louse, and then he was a cad and had like a tryst with Darcy's 15-year-old sister, and like broke her heart and ran off, and shit. So like once she learns all that, she's basically like, oh well, you're in the right and Mr. Wickham's in the wrong,
Okay.
and whatnot. So those are the two things.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks for clarifying, because I was a little confused on that.
Actually, there is a third thing, but that happens after Lydia and Wickham get married. But,
Yeah. The scene where he proposes to her in the rain.
In the rain.
Is maybe the scene. I maybe have seen this scene before, because it seems like it's like one of the most famous parts of the movie.
It is also, in my opinion, the first time Matthew Macfadyen is hot in this movie.
Is when he's drenched in rain.
I said this, and the Podmaster had a similarly bemused reaction. I don't think Matthew Macfadyen got hot in this movie until he was wet. I think Mr. Darcy, much like a chia pet, just add water and then it's working for me, right? Before that in this movie, he looks a little... I think part of it is his Regency costuming. His collar is buttoned very high, and Matthew Macfadyen doesn't have the strongest jawline. I think the softness of his jawline and the height of his collar was sort of making his face look a little shapeless to me in a weird way. And I also thought the haircut wasn't doing him a lot of favors.
The haircut's definitely not doing him a lot of favors.
Until it's wet.
Yeah.
And then I see it wet and I'm like, he's kind of rocking that. So he was hot to me finally when he got wet. And then when he starts unbuttoning his shirt, like later on at the towards the end of the movie, when he's trudging through the moors with his shirt like halfway unbuttoned, I was like, now that's a snack and a half.
Yeah.
But it takes a while for him to get there.
Yeah, I think this is a great scene, and like just these two actors are really like just nailing it in this fucking scene.
Totally.
We're jumping all over the place here. One thing I do want to point out about the scene when Lizzie finds out that Lydia ran away with Wickham.
Yeah.
And she's like crying, and she keeps like leaving the room and coming back in.
Yeah.
Darcy standing up and sitting back down every time she comes into the room.
Very funny.
Very, very funny.
Yes.
And also adorable as shit.
Yeah. To go back to the rain scene for just a second.
Yeah.
Since we're jumping around anyway. I do love a lot of the writing in this movie, which is a lot just directly from Jane Austen. I wanted to especially call out the line from Darcy, which I think gives you a window into his character and why he is not just like a brooding asshole, but is actually like clearly like a sensitive person deserving of the love of Lizzie, but also the love of the viewer, right? He says in the scene where they're drenched, or maybe it's before that, but he says, "I do not have the talent of conversing easily with people I have never met before," right? When she asks him about like why he's like so standoffish. And I was right. It's so relatable. And I'm like, the way Matthew Macfadyen delivers that, we haven't really talked about his performance. We talked a little about Keira Knightley, but I think Matthew Macfadyen is good in this.
I think he's good.
And the way he delivers it is kind of like, he's sort of like a little puppy dog, you know? You kind of just want to like take care of him because he's like, he's in this world where due to his position in society and the amount of wealth he's inherited and stuff, he's obligated to entertain strangers all the time, and he fucking hates it. You know, he's like, I don't like talking to people. And it's like, it's such a relatable moment from him. And it's like that line of dialogue specifically I wanted to call out because I think it's pretty integral to caring about him and not just seeing him as like a pompous ass.
Well, I think another thing that makes me care about him is the scene when Lizzie's wandering through his big ass house and stumbles upon him and is like spying on him. And he's with his sister. I don't think she necessarily realizes that it's his sister and like thinks that maybe he's been with someone else or whatever. Yeah. But when she comes back over and is introduced to his sister, and his sister's like, I've already heard so much about you. It seems like we're already friends. It's like the first time that we see Darcy smile is with his sister.
That's a huge moment in this movie. You're right. That is the first time he ever cracks a smile, and he's smiling constantly around her,
Mhm.
which is so endearing.
Yeah, I just the love that he has for his sister.
Yes. She's like the only thing he seems to care about.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Is I think it's just such an interesting depth to his character in this.
Yeah, and I really think that that's sort of the Georgiana, I don't remember his sister's name. It's one of those. The relationship between him and his sister, I think, is one of the, if not the most important thing to nail with your Mr. Darcy for the character to work,
Mhm.
right? And I think this movie really nails it, right? Where it's like, as soon as you see them interact, you totally get it. He's very protective of her. He admires her a lot. This is just like a person that he loves so much. And it's like, he just doesn't have that much outward love to give, right? He's just a person who has like bottled up his emotions, and there's only so much like capacity he has to let them out. And this is the person who he's decided to let them out with.
Yeah.
You know? And it's like, that's, again, it's very relatable.
Well, he sees the rest of high society as fake.
Yeah.
And they're that's why he's constantly saying things that aren't necessarily tactful, or the things you don't say in polite conversation. He sees it all as a big charade.
Right.
And the most real person to him in his life is his sister, and then he also finds that with Elizabeth.
Yes. And his sister, by the way, plays the piano beautifully.
Yes.
I love the scene where she's playing the piano and he's just like listening to her play and just like loving it,
Yeah.
which is the one we're talking about. But also she's playing like the main theme from the movie, like diegetically.
Yeah, I didn't know if it was something that was composed specifically for the movie. If it
Yeah,
was
I don't
a
know what
piece
the
of
piece
time,
is. Yeah.
but it's lovely.
Yeah. Yeah. So we've jumped around a little bit, but like basically the next like big thing that happens is like Lydia runs off with Wickham, which we've already sort of talked about.
Yeah.
And he basically demands a ransom in order to marry her and leave her honor unsullied, because presumably they have fucked. Which is the unsaid thing. No one will ever say something like that in Pride and Prejudice, but that's the subtext under this whole thing, is basically like, they've fucked already. So if he doesn't marry her now, we're ruined. So someone pays the money. They hear that it's like an uncle or something, but basically the thing that Elizabeth eventually learns is that it was Darcy.
Mm-hmm.
Like he pays Wickham's ransom fee to marry Lydia. So like that's like the whole big thing here. That's kind of the third act conflict, right? Is that whole bit. I like the whole thing where Wickham and Lydia come home and everybody's sort of like, okay, like, great, this is the best way this could have worked out. And only Lydia is happy in the scene.
Mm-hmm.
Like, everybody else is like, the Mr. and Mrs. Bennet are kind of like, okay, now we just have to, like, have polite conversation and, like, Christmas dinners with this fucking asshole who stole our daughter. And Wickham's like, I'm trapped with this woman I don't love, right? And Lydia's like, have you all seen my ring? Have you all seen my pretty dress he bought me? I'm happy for Lydia. I hope she stays this enthusiastic about this marriage, because she's the only one who's having a good time.
I love that Judi Dench just shows up in this movie and is just a giant bitch.
Yes. It's probably the most dramatic and tense scene of this movie is the one where Judi Dench shows up in their house and is like, look at this shithole. Look at all these daughters. What do you people want from me? You want all my money, don't you? And of course she's doing it in a much more like mannered and like reserved way than that. But like that's what makes it so tense, is like you can tell that she like wants to scream at these people and like can't, because that's not what proper people do.
Yeah.
It's great. Judi Dench obviously is great in this movie.
Yeah.
She's, a legend.
Mm-hmm.
And she fucking rocks it.
And I think it's a great moment that kind of reinforces the class themes in this movie, where it's like, they are up, sort of like upper middle class.
Right.
But even within this society, there is a class divide
Yeah.
between them and fucking super rich lady Catherine de Bourgh.
Turns out not much has changed.
Yeah. So we're basically at the end here. We're wrapping things up.
Yeah.
Bingley and Rosamund Pike. Jane, is that her name?
Jane. Yeah.
They marry. Bingley comes back with one of the great all-time apologies from a guy who knows that he's fucked up.
Yep.
I have been a most unmitigated and comprehensive ass.
I love that then it cuts away. He says that, and then it like cuts away from the proposal, and like you don't see. He then goes down on one knee after saying that.
Yeah.
And then it cuts.
Well, even the shots in this where it's like there's one shot of him on the very left side of the frame,
yeah.
and another shot of her on the far right side of the frame, and eventually like they come together as he walks over to her.
Yeah.
Just a great job of, again, conveying like the distance and the relationship between these characters at this point in the story.
Yeah. Yeah. And they get engaged and it's all happy.
Yeah.
And
then
$5,000 a year.
Yeah, and then Keira Knightley's out in the
She takes a gorgeous early morning walk on the British moors. What I would give to take a little early morning walk on the British moors. It just the vibes are immaculate,
especially with Keira Knightley.
Well, yeah,
for me at least.
She's wrapped in her cozy little blankie.
Mm-hmm.
It's just it looks immaculate. It's a wonderful visual.
And then gross sweat Matthew
McFadyen does a masterclass in trudging in this shot. This is god tier trudging. This man trudges through these moors towards the camera in an unbroken shot for like a while. It just holds on him trudging. And I was like, that motherfucker trudging. I love to see it. He looks gorgeous. His shirt's all unbraced. His hair's a little soggy. He's got some mud on him. I'm like, that is Mr. Darcy.
This is
I don't know who that buttoned up motherfucker with the stupid haircut was, but this is Mr. Darcy.
This has become a recurring segment on the show at this point, which is my Kung Pao Enter the Fist brain, which is there's a scene in Kung Pao Enter the Fist, which I guess we'll have to do at some point on the show. I guess so,
because you reference it so much.
Is chosen one? I'm coming. Chosen one, and it's the same shot of him running towards the camera, just repeated again. I'm coming. Oh, it's like the shot.
It's the same gag from Monty Python and the Holy Grail,
yeah,
right?
Yeah.
Where the knight is running towards the castle, and every time they cut back, it's the same shot.
Yeah.
And then suddenly he's right there.
Yeah, that's what I thought during this scene.
Yes.
And then they're together. Yay! It's wonderful, beautiful, golden hour shot that, of course, we're gonna throw on the poster.
Yeah. Hey, rightfully so.
I would center the poster design around the
pig's balls.
Giant nuts. What kind of Pride and Prejudice movie is this?
What if Pride and Prejudice 2005's poster was just those pig's balls?
You know, the like Letterboxd Pro or whatever lets you make your own posters and select custom posters. I hope that someone has made one with those pig nuts.
When we release this episode, one of the two of us should go into Canva and make a Pride and Prejudice poster that's just the pig's balls. Pride and pig nuts. Pig nuts and prejudice.
And
pig left nut and pig right nut. Yeah. So anyway, like they don't kiss here.
They don't kiss.
They have a moment where basically Elizabeth is like, I was so wrong about you. I hated you for so long, and it turns out you were just doing nice things for me and my family because you love me so much. And he's like, yep, that's pretty much the shape of it. And then we cut to like they're married, right? They have been, well, actually we do the whole thing with Donald Sutherland.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
then we cut to them married, and that's the final scene.
Yeah. And yeah, it's, call me Mrs. Darcy when you're incandescently happy. And he's like, Mrs. Darcy, Mrs. Darcy, Mrs. Darcy, Mrs. Darcy. Yep. And I'm like, oh boy.
Yep.
This is working for me.
I was crying.
And then Podmaster doesn't like this ending very much.
Oh, okay.
She thinks it trivializes her. She just yelled that from the other room. So yeah, but it worked fine for me. But the Podmaster is entitled
worked
to
fine for me.
opinion.
Made me cry.
Yeah.
I think, I don't know, it just fits into the same sort of headstrong, clever, witty personality that they both have.
Right.
And just, a next level game from Mr. Darcy to lay that honor.
Yeah.
Mr. Darcy, Mr. Darcy, Mr. Darcy.
That's really the thing with this movie is, what if two people were not only hot, but guess what? They're smart too.
And they just insulted their way into a relationship.
Yeah.
It's
just neg your way into a marriage.
It's funny because this ending happened and I was crying, and then no less than 5 minutes later, Audrey picked me up to drive me to rehearsal. Thanks for the ride, Audrey. And I got into the car, and the first thing I said was, "Sorry, I'm emotionally broken from the end of Pride and Prejudice."
Did she understand?
She understood.
Yeah. Did you talk about Pride and Prejudice a lot?
We talked about it a little bit.
Nice.
She's a listener of the show, as listeners will know.
Yes,
she's
also past guest
on
future
the craft.
Guest.
So I wanted to hold off some of it for this episode. So
Yeah.
hope you enjoyed it, Audrey, and the rest of you listening. Before we get to our verdicts, one question that I wanted to ask.
Yeah.
Which I guessed Podmaster can answer because she's in the next room and has not fallen asleep, even though she has to get up at 2:00 in the morning tomorrow. Is the Podmaster a fan of this book, and is that why she's a fan of the movie?
The Podmaster has read the book. I don't know whether she is a fan or not. I think if I were to hazard a guess about the Podmaster's literary tastes, which is treacherous territory for me to venture into, I would say that she's probably a fan of Jane Austen. I would say she probably likes this book. I don't know if she loves this book. She said mid.
Okay.
So that's probably what I meant, but she would just articulate it differently.
Okay. So that's Pride and Prejudice. And Pig Balls.
Pride and Prejudice and the Balls of a Swine.
Featuring a special appearance by Mr. Fitzwilliam. Says his name just like that.
And an even more special appearance by, and I cannot stress this enough, that pig's huge nuts.
That's the verdict time. You ask me?
I think I ask you, yeah. David, is Pride and Prejudice from 2005 the greatest movie ever made?
Justice.
Yeah.
I was really surprised by this movie.
Yeah.
Surprised at how much I enjoyed it, because this type of story is not for me. This type of period drama is not my speed of period drama, not my flavor. I much prefer my giant battles and my Napoleonic naval movies.
Right. If you're gonna visit this general period in world history, it's gonna be in the form of Master and Commander.
Yeah, I'm gonna watch a movie that begins with one of the greatest naval battles you've ever seen. Is actually bookended by two of the greatest naval battles ever put on film, and then the entire middle is just British dudes making puns and singing shanties.
Fuck yeah. I really gotta watch that movie. I've never seen it.
Anyway, so despite
any pig nuts in Master and Commander?
No.
That's a shame.
No. Some more monitor lizards though. Because they go to the Galapagos at one point. Anyway, so despite this movie not really being in my genre, I had a really good time with it, and most of that is just, I think this is a really, really well-made film, a well-shot film, a well blocked film that tells you so much about the characters just through the way that they're arranged in the frame and their spatial relationships to each other. I did find myself wrapped up in the emotions of it. That all being said, I still feel like I'm a little bit at arm's length with this movie because of the genre and some of the things that it falls back on, which is like, it's a Jane Austen romance, and that's not necessarily my thing.
Right.
But this did get me really interested in the story, and I'm actually looking forward to revisiting this film at some point and seeing if my appreciation for it changes, because I was really impressed with this and impressed with the performances, and but I don't think it's the greatest movie ever made on this watch. But I did have a really good time with it.
Yeah.
And definitely surprised me in more ways than one, so I can definitely recommend it. Justice.
Yes.
I have a twofold question for you.
Yeah.
One, is this the greatest movie ever made?
Uh-huh.
And two, if she answered this or not, as an unofficial first Podmaster verdict.
Yeah.
Does your wife think this is the greatest movie ever made?
David, so we did talk about this, and I think she did. She asked me what my verdict was going to be, and I think in that conversation she also said what her verdict would be. She can correct me if she can hear me if I'm wrong. When I say her verdict. But so you opened this episode by saying that I probably like this movie more than you. After our conversation about it, and especially after your verdict, I don't know if that's true. I kind of think we both liked this movie about the same amount. Because if I were to recite all my feelings about this movie, it would basically be a repeat of everything that you just said. I think it is immaculately well made. I think the performances are great. It's wonderful to watch. I enjoyed it immensely. And also, I don't watch movies like this very often because it's not the thing that I'm primarily interested in, right? So I think you would be hard-pressed to find a Regency romance that is better than this one, at least based on my relatively naive understanding of the available Regency romance films out there, right? I do think this is a great example of it, and at the same time, I'm kind of like, yeah, but it's still like a thing that I don't really seek out that much. And it's a great version of it, but greatest movie ever made? Nah, I don't know. It's one that I would like to go back to because I think my appreciation of it might grow over time if I view it more.
Mm-hmm.
But for right now, I'm basically like, yeah, it's an amazing movie. It's very well made. I enjoyed the experience of watching it greatly. I don't know if I'd call it the greatest movie ever made. Right? I'm going to go with a no.
Okay.
So that's me. When I was talking to the Podmaster about it, she was sort of not in the same boat, not that this isn't her type of movie, because it is. She loves a lot of like costume drama, costume romance, Regency era stuff. But she was sort of in the same boat as me, basically being like, yeah, it's really good, but greatest movie ever made? I don't think so. Right?
Okay.
So I think that her verdict is also no on Pride and Prejudice, despite this being a movie that she loves very dearly, and thinks is a great time and recommended for us to watch because she wanted us to talk about it.
It was a great suggestion. I didn't expect. This wasn't what I expected her to say at all, and I'm really glad that she did because we probably never would have talked about this movie without it.
I think a good rationale for why the Podmaster and I both landed on no is a counterexample of a movie that is also a period romance that both of us probably would say yes to is James Cameron's Titanic, which we watched last week.
Okay.
Right? It's a period. It's a different period, but it's period, right? And it's a romance. And that movie had me bawling my eyes out 4 times during the runtime. And I was like so invested in the romance and like everything about that movie. I was like, this is a technical marvel. It's amazing. The performances are incredible. And I'm feeling so much stuff. And with Pride and Prejudice, like, I just feel like I didn't quite get there. And I feel like if I may speak for the Podmaster, I think she gets there a little bit more with Titanic versus like something like this, which is like a comfort watch for her, but not something that she would say is like the pinnacle of cinema.
Yeah. And I think it's pretty safe to say that we love Pig with the Giant Nuts.
Yeah.
I don't know if he has anything on Propeller Guy.
Yeah, and you know what? If Pig with Giant Nuts appears in any other films, I would like to be a Pig with Giant Nuts completist. I just want to view his entire filmography. Maybe another one of his films, if he appeared in any others. Maybe those are the greatest movies ever made. If they feature his nuts more prominently, we might be talking about something here. Because I cannot stress enough how big this pig's balls are. They're so big.
Massive. It's like the picture that people would post on Twitter of that pig, shitting on his own balls.
Holy shit.
I think that pig's balls are bigger.
Yeah, the pig who shits on his own balls.
Yeah.
Yeah. Man, I love that picture.
Okay, that's the show. Recommend us to your friends.
Yeah.
I don't know about this episode with all the pig balls talk.
Podmaster, did you hear me say your verdict about this movie? I said that. Okay, goodbye. She doesn't give a shit.
Okay.
What is your verdict?
Oh, so she's amending her verdict to fuck off.
Yes, her verdict. Just erase everything I just said. Her official verdict is fuck off.
Tell your friends about the show. Tweet about the show. We appreciate your support. We love you all so much. Next week, we're talking about another movie that we probably never would have talked about, and I picked it. We're watching The Judge with Robert Downey Jr. and Robert Duvall.
Can you explain to our listeners why you picked this movie? Because you explained it to me, and I think it's hilarious.
So, we'll get into it next week.
Okay,
I think it's better getting next.
You're right.
Next
You're right.
week.
Let's leave this as a cliffhanger for next week. If you want to hear why the fuck David picked The Judge,
for a specific reason, I was sort of interested in watching this. I picked up a used copy. It's sitting on my shelf, and I need an excuse to watch it. So join us next week for The Judge.
For The Judge.
I have no idea what to expect.
I don't either. Literally, I don't even know what genre this movie is.
I don't know
I
either.
just know that it's Robert Duvall and Robert Downey Jr.
Yeah.
And that's all I know. And I thought there was a scene where an old man gets his ass wiped, but then I think I was actually thinking about The Father starring Anthony Hopkins.
Oh, okay.
That might not be The Judge, but I guess we'll find out.
Yeah. Check back in next week.
Yep.
We love you so much. And as always,
later dipshits.
Shits.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of The Greatest Movie Ever Made. Please remember to leave us a rating and a review, and to subscribe to the show wherever you listen. We appreciate you supporting the show and spreading the word. Tell your friends to listen, tell your enemies to listen, tell your mom to listen. If your neighbor has an unsecured Bluetooth speaker, connect to it and play an episode. You can follow us on social media at TGMEM_podcast. And if you've got a movie that you want us to talk about, send us an email at thegreatestmoviepodcast@gmail.com.